Pamela, would you share your story from Alabama?
Hi, my name is Pamela Roach. I'm from Lowndes County, Alabama, and I live in a mobile home with my 2 kids.
It's all right.
They charged me over $114,000 on a mobile home. They're falling apart, and then all animals coming in my house. Possum, that trap 4 possum in my house, cats and stuff. And I got raw sewage. I don't have no money on power. And I have to travel back and forth to Birmingham to take my daughter with the CPAP machine. Don't have a car and don't have no way to take her. And then we have a high utility bill. And I was paying like $370 a month on the trailer. And I have like $270-something a light bill and $300-something like in the summertime. And the trailer don't hold no air and stuff in it, so it just, the power bill just, the light, where have the unit at, it just wrong. It don't cut out during the daytime. And it's hard. I couldn't buy my children stuff for what they need.
Pamela let us come in her house courageously. It was hard. She said, I want the nation maybe to help somebody else. A predatory lender raped her, literally, and made her pay $120,000 for a single white house that she's still paying for. Mold is on the wall. That's why her daughter has CPAP machine at 10 years old.
Mold and mildew and stuff in the house.
Yep. And she can't get out of the loan because of the predatory lender. She's in the Poor People's Campaign. She said, I have no place else to go but fighting. Her daughter's in the room, I believe.
Yes,
she's 10 years old, and she is on a CPAP machine, pre-existing condition, because of the mold that's in this trailer that she can't get out of because of predatory lending in Alabama. Hello, everybody who has come today from all over the country, the members of Congress, the members of the media, our grassroots leaders. We welcome you to this congressional briefing that the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is sponsoring to put forth the moral public policy platform for the healing of the nation. We come here today after more than 2.7 million people gathered with us on the Mass Poor People's Assembly Moral March on Washington, a digital affair. We had planned to be in DC on Pennsylvania Avenue, but we were advised by our public health specialists not to, and it actually became a blessing because millions of people were literally able to join in on that day, and they heard from people all over this country. They heard from people from California to the Carolinas, from coal miners in Kentucky to people in the Mississippi Delta and Alabama. They heard from Union people and Kansas farmers. They heard from the Apache Nation and the Navajo Nation. They heard and they saw people of every race, creed, color, sexuality, religion, people of faith, people of not of faith, who have come together around the deep principles of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, to change the narrative and to build power, and who are going to be deeply, deeply, deeply engaged, as we often say, nonpartisan, but not non-political. We also want you to know today we invited both sides of the aisle because we believe poverty and these issues should be something that all people work on. It is sad that we don't see that, but that's what it should be. Now, you will be able to see who in fact accepted the invitation. If they didn't come, that's on them, it's not on us. But we in fact are taking note of that. Who in fact has come, because these are serious issues. Liz will talk to you about the interlocking injustices and the principles of this campaign and why we focus. We will talk about today how in fact study after study showed that poor and low wealth people, the number of poor and low wealth people, for instance, that could vote, that aren't registered, that may haven't been moved to vote, actually hold the power to change the margin of elections in any state in this country. But more importantly, they represent humanity, 140 million people, poor and low wealth people in this country, and you cannot address For instance, poverty without addressing the systemic racism and the other issues that Liz will talk about that represent our values. We have come today with the platform. We've been at this for more than 4 years. Some people have been doing it all their lives. This is not a movement that just popped up for a moment and will go away. It's not a fad. It's rooted deeply. It's 45 coordinating committees in 45 states. It's more than 20 religious and denominational bodies, and more than 200 other partners across this country. But most importantly, it is people, impacted people who guide, who lead, who speak, who allow Liz and I and others to serve, who are saying it's time. It's time for these issues to be addressed. Today, as we come, we know that we have congressional people on the line, and we want you to know that we have done an evaluation of through our economists and our political scientists of various bills that have already been proposed, and we will talk about those that at the end that line up with our agenda somewhat, things that we need to see increased, and we will certainly push some of those if they line up with the principles of this campaign. But we want the Congress people to know this is the day, not so much to talk about what people have done, not to talk about the bills that are, some of them are laying dormant because of one side of the political aisle. But what we really want you to do today is to hear the completeness of this vision. And we're looking for those Congress people that will champion, not a left platform, not a right platform, not a conservative platform, not a liberal platform, but a moral platform that's rooted in our deepest religious principles, our deepest constitutional principles, and yes, rooted in our deepest economic policies, because the cost of inequality is worse than the cost of fixing it. The cost of inequality. So we're excited that we will call on both sides of the aisle. If one side doesn't answer, then media and others, you all can hear that for yourself. We're going to have some people to make opening comments, but we want to get right into attorney economist Shally Gupta-Bond presenting this moral platform, and in detail on the 20th of June. More than 400,000 people sent parts of this platform to governors, legislators, and Congress people. And on this coming Monday, we will join unions. The Poor People's Campaign is a part of unions, part of Black Lives Matter, and others that will be engaging in strike and protest around economic issues, around issues of race and economics that we know you can never really separate. And so that's enough in terms of welcoming everybody, because we really want to get to work here. We've come to present this platform. We ask our Congress people to take notes. We ask you to receive what we're trying to do. We've done some real homework on this, so we know what's out there and what's not out there. But really, we want you to hear, and this comes from the people. So it's not about turning back Reverend Barber, or turning back Reverend Liz Theoharis, or turning back Shally Gupta-Bond or others. These things come from the people, their allies, their advocates, their economists, their sociologists. And we know that there is a possibility for healing in this country of not just recent events, but the long train of abuses. But it's going to require a deeply moral public policy platform that we are willing to fight for in this moment. So Shally Gupta-Bond, attorney, thank you for hosting today as our public policy director. Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, co-chair, I want to turn it over to her now to talk about our principles, and then we'll have a video clip, and then we're going to call on McCarthy from the Republican side and see if he answers here, and then if he doesn't answer, we're going to call on Speaker Pelosi, who is the Speaker of the entire House. So she represents everybody. Y'all do know that. She represents, as they say outside, everybody. Liz?
Thank you so much, Reverend Barber. And it's an honor to be here with you and to share today the Poor People's Campaign, a National Call for Moral Revival's platform. This moral agenda to heal the nation of Poor People's Jubilee platform indeed identifies legislative and policy priorities to heal this country. We are living in the richest country in the world, the United States of America, and yet there are 140 million poor and low-income people who struggle to make ends meet, who are dying in a land of abundance. There indeed are 250,000 people, 250,000, who die every year in this country from poverty and inequality. 62 million workers who work jobs that pay less than a living wage, 80 million people who are uninsured or underinsured, even in a public health crisis and pandemic. We have fewer voting rights today than we did when the Voting Rights Act was passed more than 50 years ago. And communities all across this nation are being militarized, abandoned by economic and social institutions, and devastated by the climate crisis. And so the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival from Alaska to Arkansas, California to the Carolinas, Mississippi to Maine, Kansas to Kentucky, the Bronx to the border, the Appalachian Hollers to the Apache Sacred Lands. We are coming together to organize our moral outrage against systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, militarism in the war economy, and this false moral narrative of Christian nationalism into a powerful moral fusion movement. For too long, our society, including Congress, has invested in punishing the poor. But what we're saying here with this moral agenda to heal the nation is that we must now invest in the welfare of all. This nation has invested in systemic racism, voter suppression, the militarization of our communities for too long. We must now invest in expanding democracy and establishing peace and justice across the land. Too much state, local, and federal money is invested in the wealthy and in large corporations, while poor and low-income people are left to fend for ourselves. We must now invest in the people who have built up this country and who make it run every day. The platform and our campaign is grounded in 5 principles. First, we need a moral revolution of values to repair the breach in our society. We abide by our deepest constitutional and moral commitments to justice. We say that where harm has been done, it must be acknowledged and undone, and it can be done. We believe that everybody must be in. Nobody must be left out. There are too many people hurting, and we can't be silent about this devastation, this poverty, this racism, this climate crisis, this war economy anymore. We think, we know that everybody is deserving of this nation's abundance. We have the resources to care for absolutely everybody. We also abide by this principle that when you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Instead of trickle down, we start from the bottom up. In this pandemic alone, trillions of dollars have gone primarily to bail out corporations and the wealthy, while tens of millions of people have been completely left out and hundreds of millions are feeling the pain. What we know from economists and policy experts, moral leaders, and those most impacted by injustice is that we must organize our policy prescriptions first around the poor, the homeless, the marginalized, the uninsured, and the sick. And when we do that, everybody benefits. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, prioritizes the leadership of the poor, low income, and most impacted. Those who are on the front lines of these crises are also helping to lead and identify solutions. In this policy platform that we're putting out today, the solutions we come forth with come actually out of poor and low income struggles and people with concrete solutions to fight widespread injustice. A final policy principle. We believe in Jubilee. We believe that debts that can't be paid must be relieved, released. We demand freedom, some servicing debts that folks cannot afford to pay, whether it's household debt, whether it's mortgage debt, whether it's rental problems, whether it's student debt. The nation's misplaced priorities are not only damaging the social fabric of our entire country, but they're moving us toward a fundamentally unstable society where the truly only wealthy prosper. Scarcity is a myth and nothing more than that. It's a lie. There is no truth. The money is there to be found. And in this moment, with all of these pandemics of COVID and racism and poverty and ecological devastation and militarism and this distorted narrative, it must be done. These are times of enormous possibility and staggering danger. These are moments that must be met with unbridled imagination, absolute seriousness, and a grounding in the principles I just reviewed. In a world distinctly stacked against the poor, we must believe, and we do believe, that we can succeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Reverend Liz. And at this time, we want all of our attendees to start with a narrative that comes out of a video, because we want to always put it at the center of everything we do, poor and impacted people who are the servant leaders in this movement. So at this time, we have a short video clip we want all of our congresspersons and others to view.
At one time, poverty was a temporary condition. You were on a down slope for a minute, but you could bounce back up. We can't bounce back up today. It's permanent. We're not going back to the factory and building cars and trucks like we once did.
A job working at McDonald's or the grocery store doesn't pay enough for one person to live.
We work a 40-hour work week, still not enough. Living from paycheck to paycheck. Rent is $600 a month. We got water bill, electricity. I do this for my kids, and it hurts.
I'm 46 years old. I've lived in poverty here in West Virginia every day of my life. And I'm working. I am working poor with a bachelor's degree. I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
We were in the height of mass water shutoffs. This entire neighborhood was shut off all at one time.
I saw all my neighbors get shut off right in front of me. It was kind of terrifying.
I'm 42 years old, and I'm a cashier at McDonald's. I had lost my house. You're welcome to come inside. There's a lot of people that are living in their cars. You never notice until you're in the same situation.
I don't have stuff to give my children. I'm paying all these bills, and they need school clothes and stuff. And they be asking me for it, I can't give it to them.
Now I'm a Kansas farmer's wife. Kansas farmers are committing suicide. Why? They're usually in debt up to their eyeballs.
I see poverty in my own community. You know, there's a 70% unemployment rate in the reservation right now.
Here in New York City, we're home to millionaires and billionaires, and we have so many people living in the street, and that's just not right.
I've been a homeless veteran twice, lived in a shelter.
I've been living down here since I was 17.
My only chance of going to college was joining the Army. We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
700,000 people in this country are on the verge of losing their food stamps.
This budget calls for shrinking the social safety net programs like Medicare.
I just know that everything that's happening to us isn't right.
I'm in stage 5 of kidney disease. I fell behind on my health care, and they canceled my health insurance, and they told me I have to wait until open enrollment. There's only 5 stages of kidney disease, and I'm in the 5th stage. Murder, it's murder. You know, if you ask me, it's murder.
I lost a son to gun violence, and I lost a daughter.
No parent should have, in America, should have to bury their child for a lack of medical space.
I'm wailing because my children
My God.
are no more.
My God. My God, Kevin.
more. Will it? Cause my babies ain't no more. How many more babies? How many more children? No more.
People are wailing across this nation, across this world, and you can see how diverse it is. As we go into this public policy moment, what we're really saying is that every progressive policy, such as denial of health care, denial of living wages, denial of lifting from the bottom, denial of voting rights, has what we call a death measurement. People die when people suppress the vote, because when you suppress the vote, you allow people to get elected who suppress health care and suppress wages. And we know that poor and low-wealth people die, according to many, many studies, just from poverty itself. We know that when we protect the corporate polluters over the community and the environment, people die. We know that these policies are not just mere games, but they have impact on people's lives. That's why that Declaration of Independence says life has to be our first consideration. Life. And so that's why we're presenting this public policy agenda. That's why we're fighting for life. That's why we're saying that the 140 million poor and low wealth people, 43% of this nation will not be ignored anymore. So let me ask, first of all, Charlotte, is there a representative that we invited? People from the Republican side, is McCarthy here on the line? I don't think so. But we want to make sure everybody knew we invited folks. And so let us invite the lady who represents the entire House of Representatives. Constitution is third in line for the presidency, who is a battler, who is a fighter, and we invite her to give some opening comments. We're thankful that she would take this serious enough to be here today, to hear this platform, and to call her members to do likewise. And that is none other than Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Welcome, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Reverend Barber, for the invitation to be here, for your tremendous leadership, and for this inspiring program today, this the People's Moral Justice Jubilee Policy Platform, a statement of values for our country to follow. I always say a budget should be a statement of our national values. What we care about as a nation should be reflected in our budget. This is a wonderful guide to lifting us to a higher standard. Thank you for your clarion moral voice in America. You carry forth Dr. King's vision of the struggle for genuine equality, and that includes economic equality, among other injustices that we need to correct. And thank you, Reverend Ms. Theoharis. Wonderful to see you again, to hear your inspiring words, just a challenge to the conscience of our country. You are a voice for the voiceless and a defender of the dignity and worth of every person, of farm workers, domestic workers, people experiencing homelessness, and the poor, and indigenous people. The list goes on and on. It's a privilege to be with you all, your guest, as well as my colleagues, Barber Lee and Joe Kennedy, whom you'll be hearing from in the course of the program. Let me just say that the Poor People's Campaign is a profound force for good in America. It's an honor to work with you as you lead a revolution of values that is helping to transform our nation. Last year, I joined Reverend Barber and Reverend Theoharis to testify at a budget committee hearing on poverty in America to lift up the campaign's Poor People's Budget. As your budget stated, everybody has a right to live. In April, I was pleased to join you for an advisory committee call just to hear your plans, what was next, not coming to Washington, but being there in Washington with millions of people from around the country. Now today, I'm honored to join you again as you unveil the Moral Justice Jubilee Policy Platform. I'm a big believer in the Jubilee and the Bible, time of forgiveness. You have a sweeping, transformative plan to advance the values of justice, fairness, and freedom upon which America was founded. And it's so touching and profound that you have your platform grounded in the principles of our preamble to our Constitution, and also in what that promised. But also, when you talk about the number of poor people and people without wealth and with low wealth in our country, that is an undermining of our democracy. We try to keep saying this to people. A democracy is strengthened by the strength of the people, not by the exploitation of the people. Today, I've had a couple of different events on this score, and preparing for this, I said at a press conference this morning when we were talking about what our choices are in the HEROES Act. I know you don't want to hear about legislation, but this is something that we have to do to get money to the schools to help people who are sick and that. But I said, what the questions led me to think is that we're going to go to a caste system. If we were an older country, we might even be closer to that we have some newness about it. But a caste system, because as you have said, it's all about trickle down, put the money there. If it trickles down, okay. If not, so be it. But no, as you both have said, it's about bubble up. It's about bubble up. I also said on 2 occasions already this morning, because we're having these arguments about money, and they're saying, well, where are you going to get the money for that? I said, where'd you get the money to prop up the stock market? Where'd you get the money to give a tax break to the wealthiest people in our country, where 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%? And you're squawking about $600 given to people at this serious time. But I quoted St. Augustine, whom I'm fond of quoting, 17 centuries ago, 1700 years ago, he said, any government that is not formed to promote justice is just a bunch of thieves.
That's right.
17 centuries ago. And today we're together with a time when our values are under threat. And our nation faces a moment of reckoning as we confront the realities of racial injustice, all of the injustice, racial injustice, police brutality that goes with that, economic injustice, education injustice, health injustice, and environmental injustice. Remember our wonderful meeting that we had, so sad when you brought in families who were suffering from pollution in water and the consequences of cancer and the rest to their families. This environmental justice, as Reverend Theoharis has said, is the climate issue and the rest, that they take a toll, a disproportionate toll on people without resources. But we can't let this disproportionate impact on people of color continue. It should never be where it is. So nearly 1 month ago, with your support, the House passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. We're so proud of it. It does exactly what it needs to do. Now, it's not the end of all legislation that we'll do, but right now, ending chokeholds and no knock warrants and profiling and the rest of it, it's a wonderful bill. And when George's brother came to Congress to testify, he said, Madam Speaker, will you name the bill for my brother so his daughter will always know that he lives on? And I said, only if you think that the bill is worthy of your brother. And we passed the test. So now we have to make sure the Senate passes it. And 150 civil rights, human rights, all kinds of organizations have written to the Senate Democrats and said, don't support the Senate Republican bill because it does nothing except express some views. It's rhetoric, it's not results. But again, it's about systemic racism that we have to get to, and nobody knows that better than you. And so we want the Senate to pass that legislation. So as we go along with all of this, we have to it's a time of reckoning. We just have a chance to do something so different, consistent with our founding documents. But again, as people get poorer, the middle class and those who aspire to the middle class are the backbone of our democracy. When that goes away, when we exploit people in the workplace rather than lifting them up, or undermining our democracy. So again, embracing these dangerous, the dangerous spirit of dangerous unselfishness and the fierce urgency of now. Now, we always think it's so urgent, and really now with coronavirus, with the 17th straight week of people applying for unemployment insurance, the assault on the dignity of people, it really is urgent now. And I thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. I'll be in and out on the program because we're writing bills right now to bring to the floor next week. But my staff will be on the entire time. I just wanted to bring greetings to you from all of your many friends in the Congress. Dr. Theoharis, we're all big fans of yours, and Reverend Barber, of course. Ms. Gupta Barnes, thank you for orchestrating all of this. I'm honored to share some time with you, and I look forward to getting a full report. But in the meantime, I'll be sharing this with my colleagues as we go along. Thank you for this important document, a moral document, a document that supports our democracy, but more importantly, respects the dignity and worth of every single person. Another quote I'll make from Pope Paul VI about justice. He said, if you want justice, work for peace. Peace in our communities, peace in our hearts, peace in every way. And when you talk about the militarization and the rest, hitting it right on. So thank you for lifting us up with your spirit, your courage, your stamina, your challenge to the conscience. May we meet the challenge. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, and thank you for being open to challenging, because we fight our enemies, we challenge our friends.
That's right.
And we push, and I like that we push hard. We have some additionals in our campaign about police reform, but we also have some things about how we have to see these as interlocking injustices. We believe that the people in the street were there, yes, because of police reform, but because of so many other interlocking injustices, where we call it a reconstruction moment. We believe this is a time for third reconstruction. I see Abraham Lincoln behind you. You know, he didn't necessarily get elected to do what he did, but the times pushed him. First, he wanted to save the Union, and then he had to go further than that. So he grew in the midst of the times. Again, we thank you. We recognize that we've got to push. You're right. There are a lot of thieves in our society, as St. Augustine would say. And there are a lot of folk that sometimes we can't give in to the thieves. We have to push. And everything that we hold true today, every progressive thing that we hold true today, 100 years ago, people said it was impossible. Politicians said it was impossible. It was the people who decided to push, and they changed the atmosphere. They changed the context. And this context has changed. By the time we get through with COVID, we're going to be at over 50% people living in poverty. So we can't ignore it. By the time we get through with COVID, 40% of all people that make under $40,000 will have lost their jobs. Millions will be without health care, unemployment, housing. We're in the midst of, as Liz and I talk about now, a massive, I think if you think we saw people in the street with George Floyd, let all of these people get evicted, 20-some million people. And so this is a reconstruction time. It is a revolution of values time. It's as big as it was when Franklin Delano Roosevelt came into office, when Lincoln came into office, and we all must meet the moment. And we are saying to everybody, we were online on June 20th. When COVID is over, we'll be on Pennsylvania Avenue. We'll be in the Capitol. We're going to be in the streets. We're going to be in the ballot box, and we're going to be in the legislative suite. But the one thing we're not going to do is turn back, because we know that this moral agenda is good and the right thing at the right time for this entire nation. And we want to see change too. We want to see people elected who will decide when they start policy, they're going to start with the 143 million poor and low wealth people, and understand if you start with them, everybody else is going to be okay. But you have to start with the foundation. No, any house that the foundation is weak, if the foundation is made of sand, the Bible says when the storms come, and no matter how pretty it is, it's going to fall apart. But if the foundation is made of stone, and the stones that uphold this democracy are poor and low wealth people. They are the stones that the builders have rejected, but they are in fact the ones, and there's too many cracks in the foundation, and we're going to work to change that. And thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Thank you for being with us today. And Shally, it's your turn now to take us into this policy briefing. And with all of our friends and legislators and Congress people that are on, I'm going to turn it over to you and Liz. I'm going to go on mute so y'all won't hear my mouth anymore for right now. Liz, I'm going to turn it over to you and Shally. Shally, you got it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Reverend Barber, for joining us today for this briefing. We released a summary of the campaign's legislative and policy priorities on June 20th, but today we've released the full, comprehensive moral policy agenda to heal America, the Poor People's Jubilee platform, and which shows concretely how to implement the moral agenda that we released in 2018, around which we have been organizing in 45 states across the country, an agenda that reflects the needs and demands of the 140 million people who are poor or one emergency away from being poor in the wealthiest country in the world. Now, as we all know, that 140 million includes many of us. It includes 2 million indigenous people, 8 million Asian people, about 26 million or 60% of Black people in this country, 38 million or 64% of Latinx people, and 66 million or 1 out of every 3 white people in this country. And we've been bringing together this diverse population of every color, age, belief, gender, sexual identity in this moral fusion campaign around the contents of this platform for the past several years. And I just want to emphasize before we get into the contents of the platform itself, where it came from, where it came to be, where its roots are. And the truth is, we can point to just about every part of this platform and tell you exactly what struggle it came from. The policy solutions here reflect years of organizing, years of analysis from the front lines of these struggles for voting rights, for education, for immigration justice, for indigenous rights, for welfare, for living wages, for good jobs, housing, healthcare, water, welfare, climate justice, for peace in our communities and peace in our world, and more. It is informed by the people and communities who have an intimate knowledge of the injustices they are facing and an analysis of what will resolve them, what the solutions to these injustices are. And this is the power of the Jubilee platform. And so we have 5 sections of this platform. I'll go through each of them briefly. The full platform is available online at poorpeoplescampaign.com, and we can put the direct link in the chat for those of you who are on video so you can follow along with the platform. So there are 5 sections to this platform. The first is to end systemic racism and establish justice, the right to democracy and equal protection under the law. There are 7 pieces to this first part of the Poor People's Jubilee platform, the moral agenda to heal America. Under systemic racism and establish justice, equal protection under the law, and the right to democracy, the 7 legislative and policy priorities are, of course, to begin with voting rights. And then we talk about the rights of Indigenous people and First Nations, ending police brutality and mass incarceration, immigrant justice, immigrant rights. We talk about the undemocratic takeovers of democratically elected governments through emergency management. And then we have two pieces on education, protecting public education, providing high quality, diverse, and equitable education, ending segregation of schools, relieving student debt, and free higher education for all. So I'll go over some of these briefly. And I wanted to start first with voting rights, how to protect and expand the right to vote. We have seen that since the Shelby v. Holder decision in 2013, 25 states, as Reverend Theoharis was saying, have passed voter suppression laws that target Black, brown, Native, and poor voters. This is why the protections that were in place under the Voting Rights Act, protections that were removed by Shelby, must be reinstated. We call for a new pre-clearance formula that would include all of the jurisdictions covered under the Voting Rights Act and the jurisdictions that have passed voter suppression laws since Shelby, since 2013. All of them must be under federal jurisdiction to ensure that the right to vote is protected. We also need to legislate all of our voting rights around automatic voter registration, early registration, and more, including, importantly, right now, vote by mail for everybody. When we talk about protecting and honoring the rights of First Nations and Indigenous people, this means ensuring that their institutions are adequately funded, their health institutions, schools, that their lands and resources are protected, and also their constitutional rights, including the rights to free expression of their religion. These rights of Indigenous and Native people are throughout this platform, and we emphasize them in every section of this moral agenda to heal the nation. When we talk about ending police brutality, this means demilitarizing the police, redirecting resources to communities that have been impacted, ending mass incarceration, changing sentencing guidelines, and establishing a national truth commission. This is a model of truth-telling that has been used in the US and elsewhere to confront state-sanctioned abuses of power. We have to focus our national attention on these communities, on families that have been impacted by this violence, their organizing, their solutions, and transform their pain into power to change this unjust system of criminal violence. And that is the way forward we see necessary right now. Around immigration, we're moving from a framework of national security to one of justice, to recognizing that immigrant communities and families are here, living and working and taking care of their families. And instead of criminalizing, detaining, and deporting them, we need an immigration system that prioritizes their families, family reunification, job security, labor protections, and the general welfare of us all. This means redirecting funds from ICE and Border Patrol and the border wall towards securing appropriate documentation so people can move without fear, and meeting the needs of immigrant communities, border communities. We're talking about, when we talk about emergency management, this is the undemocratic takeovers by managers who are appointed, brought in to solve budget crises, often in majority cities where the population of people of color is more than 50%. And these managers are accountable only to financial interests that these cities owe money to. They're accountable to the banks, and they have slashed budgets for schools, cut public contracts, privatized public assets, and worse. It was an emergency manager that made the decision that poisoned the entire city of Flint. So we're calling for a moratorium on these laws, returning governance over to elected officials, and ensuring that cities don't fall into emergency management by establishing indicators that, when triggered, would infuse federal resources to cities in distress and keep cities and local governments from falling into those budget crises in the first place. And finally, yes.
I just wanted to, I'm getting some questions, and I want folk to know that we're taking all of the questions. This is a very detailed budget, it's not a one item. And so we're not going to go into every piece of the platform. That's why we're producing it so that people can read it. Some of the questions, if you hold tight, she will get to them. This is what is different about this platform. It is interlocking. It is facing the interlocking injustices. So for instance, even when we talk about protecting and expanding right to vote, and we say we want the Voting Rights Act restored, but then you have to read inside of it, because it doesn't mean restore it, but then put so many pieces in it that no state can or a jurisdiction can even qualify to be under it. This is why we've been critical of some of the proposals that have been put forward now, because it's there, but it's not there, because it takes too much for states and localities to qualify. And the same thing with, as we're adding some things to police, dealing with police violence, and you hear, but it's comprehensive, y'all. I want you to hear that. It's comprehensive. So we want to go all the way through, because we don't see any one of these things separated from the other. And I want to make that point for those that are listening. We are taking the questions, but there's she's going to do the basic brief overview today, and then we're going to have more of these as well. So go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you, Reverend Barber. Finally, just the last element of our platform on systemic racism is around overhauling our education system to expand funding for early childhood education, for Head Start, for federal funding, for K-12 education that supports the education of our children, and also builds up the infrastructure that they require right now, the technological capacity, arts and cultural programming, and also support for schools, for administration, for faculty and teachers. It also ensures that public education is protected rather than replaced in this critical moment, and that federal resources are moved to end the segregation of schools, whether by income, by race, or by ability. And we include resources for higher education, making college, both 2- and 4-year colleges, free for anyone who wants to attend, releasing us from student debt, crippling student debt, beginning with 100% debt relief for borrowers who are earning less than $50,000 a year. That's part one. We have 4 more parts to this, and I promise you it gets even better. But part 2 of this platform is about promoting the general welfare, the right to welfare, and an adequate standard of living. And as Reverend Barber said, all of these sections are connected. They build on one each other. They're interrelated. None of them can stand on their own. And the first thing we need to do to promote the general welfare in this country is to change the measure of poverty. How we measure poverty is grossly inadequate and anachronistic, and it must be based instead today on what it means to be economically secure. We need, instead of an income measure that doesn't reflect the real cost of living, we need to look at what it costs to live in this country today and make sure that all federal assistance programs are pegged to provide that adequate standard of living based on those costs. Any less than that must be considered poor. Poverty is a deprivation of what you need, nothing more, nothing less. We want to establish a universal, guaranteed, adequate income, ensuring that everybody receives $2,000 per month, $1,000 for children, to be able to provide for ourselves and meet our needs, especially in an economy that is shedding millions of jobs. And we include a care income to acknowledge the unpaid but deeply important work of care work and housework in our economy. Our need to live is independent of whether or not we have a job, and our ability to live must also be guaranteed. This section also includes a total overhaul of our welfare system. It's the most sweeping changes to welfare since 1996, which undid welfare as we know it. And we want to establish a welfare as a right that strengthens our society. We're going to end programs like TANF and establish a direct cash assistance program for the poor and expand the welfare programs that do work, like SNAP, like the child tax credit, as well as expanding who is eligible for those programs, including immigrants and people who are formerly incarcerated. This includes as well significant resources to ensure that Social Security, supplemental security income, and Social Security disability insurance are protected and insured for everybody, to ensure we can all have adequate standards of living at all times. These critical sources of income must be protected and expanded in times of crisis when necessary. And finally, to promote the general welfare, we are calling for an end to homelessness. We know that, and we are calling for secure housing for all. There are 10 million people already in this country who are homeless or on the verge of homelessness. And we are witnessing a looming crisis from this pandemic. 20 million more face evictions in the coming weeks. But we can solve this problem. There are 18 million vacant homes right now. Our Housing First program will first stop all evictions, a moratorium on all evictions, and then mobilize public resources and capacity to turn vacant homes into habitable homes, to build new housing and secure and expand rental assistance and make sure that housing costs are affordable through federal assistance programs, through curbing housing speculation that drives up the cost of housing, and by penalizing financial and other interests that have made money off of homelessness, that have made money off of foreclosures. This platform ensures that everybody has a home. I'm going to move on to the third section of this platform, to ensure domestic tranquility and the right to work with dignity. This section has 4 parts as well. The first part is to expand and update our measure of employment and employment coverage. As with the poverty measure, our unemployment measure must capture the full extent of who is without a job in this economy. The measure that's currently used just leaves out too many people. But we're proposing an alternative measure, a measure that the government already collects information on to become the new standard and to capture the precarious nature of work today. This will have real consequences. Unemployment coverage was expanded during the pandemic to include many categories of workers that are already left out of that first definition of unemployment. And millions of people are now relying on that expanded coverage to make ends meet. That coverage is set to expire in a matter of days. So what we need to do is first secure that expanded coverage, make sure the expanded definition of who is eligible for unemployment is made permanent, and change how we measure that to make sure that everybody has the necessary coverage when we need it, because nobody is safe in this economy from being unemployed. We need to ensure that the wages we are earning are adequate and secure. We're calling for living wages, at least $15 an hour immediately, and then moving up to a real housing wage. A housing wage is so we don't have to work 3, 4, and 5 jobs to make ends meet. We should be able to work one job if we're willing and able and to work and have those decent jobs to meet our needs. So a real housing wage in 2019 was $23 an hour. So we need to be able to be paid enough, have a living wage, have a housing wage to meet every single one of our needs. We're also calling for a federal jobs program. The Jubilee jobs program will secure full employment as a right in this country. This program prioritizes socially beneficial industries with massive investments in childcare, caregiving, education, housing, healthcare, mass transit, water and utilities infrastructure, cultural production, and it's going to prioritize also deindustrialized areas, poor and low-income communities, rural areas, small towns, and indigenous communities. And the kinds of jobs that are going to be provided for through this program will include opening and expanding rural hospitals, building new homes and retrofitting existing housing units so they are climate resilient, expanding our water and sanitation infrastructure, building up our failing schools, and making sure there is arts and cultural programming for poor and low-income communities. And finally, we need to secure the right to free association and the right to form and join unions for all workers. So these are the key elements of Part 3 to ensure domestic tranquility and the right to work with dignity in this country. Moving on to Part 4, which is to secure the blessings of liberty, which we interpret today as the right to health and a healthy environment in this country. And there are 5 parts to this. Yes, Reverend Barber.
Just before you go to the next part, again, I want people to note that as we look at this, it's comprehensive. Again, we want folk to go in and read the small print and join us. So there's some of the questions, again, very positive questions. I want folk to know it's important that they look at the entire piece, all of the fine print. Somebody said, well, do you have more than bullet points? Oh, yes, there are more than bullet points. And so you can go and read that. Another question was on reparations. Reparations is a part of this. We're doing a special section on reparations because the reality, when you look at all of these issues, you have to do that. And we're going to put that section out. We want to work with some of our partners before we finish that particular piece because we're very serious about it. We don't just want to say the word. There was a recent study that came out from Northwestern University that said if you look at the amount of money that was transferred from the backs of free labor of slaves and multiplied by 6% interest, it would be $154 trillion. So these are different numbers that are going around. So yes, that is a part of it. And we're going to be working with some partners and we're going to include all of that. Because when we do it, we want to be serious and we want to stay with it and we want it to be factually right. We want to be intense about it and focused on it. So we have our groups working on that as well, because you cannot have domestic tranquility if you don't deal with the issue of historic racism and reparations and what was stolen from First Nation people and from those who were made to work for free in this country as slaves and property. Thank you, Chef.
Thank you, Reverend Barber. Yes, the full platform with all the details can be found at poorpeoplescampaign.org under the About section. So yes, we have 2 more sections to cover, and then we will hear some comments. This 4th section on securing the blessings of liberty, we talk about this in terms of the right to health and a healthy environment. So first, we need to secure healthcare. We need to expand Medicaid to all the 14 states that have not done so. But this also means moving towards a universal single-payer health system and expanding Indian health services, and then also expanding our healthcare infrastructure and capacity. I already mentioned reopening hospitals as part of the Jubilee jobs program. We need to also prevent hospitals from being closed and move our national resources and capacity to ensure that our health is taken care of regardless of where we live or how much money we have. We're also going to end medical debt. We call for a fund that draws on the past and future profits of insurance companies, of pharmaceutical companies, and other healthcare companies to end medical debt, especially for poor and low-income people. We cannot be dying because of debt anymore. We need to secure water and utilities for all. This platform calls for a moratorium on all water and utility shutoffs. During the pandemic, this took place in over 100 cities and states in the country, but there is still no national moratorium. We need a national moratorium on water and utility shutoffs, and where they have been shut off, they must be turned back on. And that must come alongside a national water affordability plan that is based on your ability to pay. You cannot be denied water or utilities because it's too expensive. Again, this will be funded in part by profits from water companies that are operational in the United States and returning water utilities back to the public sector to make sure that our basic need for water is not a basis for private gain. We will also declare climate change a national emergency. We need to become a global leader on this, as we have been before, end reliance on a fossil fuel economy and move national resources towards this emergency to come out stronger than we currently are, with a national smart grid, a renewable energy economy, and through the Green Jobs Corps, the Jubilee Jobs program, we will build up communities that have been reliant on fossil fuels, make new investments in green energy, and redirect the wealth that has been wrongfully gained from the climate crisis towards moving us into this green transition. This includes not only fossil fuel companies, but also agribusiness, military contracts, and financial institutions and insurance companies. That wealth has to be moved towards a new economy that we all need. Finally, moving to the fifth and final section of our platform, to provide for the common defense and reprioritizing our national resources. We need to be directing the abundance of resources that is poured into the military and that is moved over to the wealthy, to corporations in Wall Street, towards meeting the needs and demands of the 140 million and more. This means calling for massive disinvestments from the Pentagon budget. We call for $350 billion in cuts from the Pentagon budget, and the full platform indicates how we get to $350 billion, including by closing bases, cutting overhead, and much more. And let's talk about taxes the day after tax day. Americans for Tax Reform recently put out a report showing that during this pandemic, there has been more wealth gained by the wealthy than the budget shortfalls in many, many states. And still, we refuse to change our system of taxation. This platform calls for fair taxes. We will raise $880 billion per year, or $8.9 trillion over 10 years, that we will redirect towards this platform. Now, this isn't just because these programs need that wealth. We can and will raise new investments and appropriations for this platform, but it's also because fair taxes are the right thing to do. This massive wealth inequality, this massive investments in military spending are a distortion of our democracy that end up making the rich richer at the expense of the poor. This is why
that one more time, Attorney Gupta. I think it's important for you to repeat that, what we're talking about, because people will try to attack this as a left budget, as a budget and a platform that's just about adding debt and spending and where we're going to get the money from. Let's just repeat that one more time. I see Liz smiling too. One more time, so that particularly members of Congress and media and others who are on understand that we will not accept any more two arguments. Number one, we don't have the money. And number two, well, in order to do all of this, we have to raise taxes. The fact of the matter, the money is there and we know where it is. It can't be hid from us anymore. So read that one more time about what has happened in this pandemic alone.
In this pandemic alone, what's happened is that there has been more wealth gained by the wealthy than the budget shortfalls that states are going to suffer. And then they're going to be in the position of having to cut programs. There's been more wealth gained than those gaps in their state budgets. And so we need a system of taxation. We need something that's going to redirect that wealth that's been wrongfully gained and move it towards the needs and demands that are indicated. And we can show how to make them possible through this platform. And this is because that massive wealth inequality, this massive investments in death and undemocratic undemocratic ways of organizing our society are a distortion of our fundamental constitutional values and moral principles that we believe in. And we're calling for an end to all of that, an end to profiteering from crisis, whether it's the climate crisis, the housing crisis, the health crisis. All of this must stop. Death and misery cannot be a basis of wealth and profit. And finally, this, in order to address the generations of injustice, we're calling to close the gap, to close the racial wealth gap by, at the very first, starting with a baby bonds program that will put money directly into accounts for children based on the wealth of their families. And this is one measure to start to narrow that racial wealth gap that is crippling communities across the country. Now, each of these 5 sections, as you can see, as others have said, is dependent on the others. just like the 5 constitutional principles upon which this country was founded. And this is what we are organizing for. This is what we are building power around to make possible, to move and direct the abundance of this country towards our needs, because too many people have been suffering for far too long, and we cannot be silent anymore. We know that the 140 million people in this country, the millions of people of conscience who witness and will not abide this suffering, our children and our children's children deserve no less than this platform. We all deserve the right to thrive and live lives that honor the dignity inherent in our very being. And because we who believe in freedom will not rest until it comes, we will continue to build power around this platform and agenda in the weeks and months and years ahead.
Thank you so much, Attorney Shally Gupta-Bond, and your tremendous team of economists and sociologists and everyday people and historians who have worked to put together this serious platform with all of us. We want people to know that we're very serious about this movement and very serious about long term. And we're not looking for a spectacle event or a silver bullet. There must be a fundamental reconstruction of our society if in fact America is going to be who she claims to be. And if we can't get that right during this pandemic and in the aftermath of this pandemic and other forms of violence, and in the face of Liz saying, well, 250,000 people are dying from just poverty and low wealth, then God help us, God help us. This is the time for a fundamental reconstruction. This campaign is committed to long term, but we also can't wait forever now, because it took us 400 years to get from 0 to 725. We can't wait another 400 years to get to 15 in the union. And we know that one of the most fundamental problems with this system, when you have a system built on slavery, a capitalism built on slavery, the goal of that system is always to keep wages and things as close to zero as possible. And that is a fundamental transformation that we must have. That's why in that 6th part where you talk about racial wealth gap, that's where we're going to add the piece when we finish completing all of it on reparations there as well. But we wanted people to, even when we talk about that, how it is that ultimately, as we say, racism is a lie. Racism is a lie. And poverty is a lie. The health professionals tell us the reason COVID is hitting us so hard is because of 2 wounds: systemic racism and systemic poverty. And what I mean by lies is they don't have to be. When people tell us those things have to exist, they don't have to exist. Systemic racism doesn't have to exist. Systemic poverty doesn't have to exist. And what we know is something my grandmother said: you scratch a lie, you find the thief. So if you find those that will buy into the lie of racism and buy into the lie of classism and accept poverty, those same forces will steal your health care, they'll steal your clean water, your clean air, will steal your very life. Because where you scratch a racist, you find a thief. Where you scratch somebody who not concerned about the poor, they will steal in their policies anything else. And if we're going to be serious about saving this democracy fundamentally, we can no longer live from the middle, right, Liz? We can no longer live from the middle, and we certainly no longer can live from the top and hope that a little bit falls out and trickles down to the bottom. We have to lift from the bottom, and you can't lift from the bottom unless we address all 4 of these 5 interlocking injustices. Attorney Gupta, you've done well. Now, we have a number of questions, and the way we're doing this is we're taking those. We can't take all of them today. I'm going to just a moment get a sheet here of them printed out. I'm going to read off some of them so that we can take them under advisement. But I want to shift a little bit and go to Michaela and Maureen and Abigail and Kina, and before we go to comments from congresspersons, and the congressperson we hope to hear from is those who saying, we get this and we're willing to champion. Our briefing today is to see who's willing to help champion the kind of changes that must be made in order for us to secure the promises of this democracy and fundamental humanity to all people. But we want you to know the people who are behind this, from Kentucky, from Michigan, from North Carolina, from California. So Michaela Curry, would you? Michaela Curry, Maureen Taylor, Abigail Mosley, Kenya also will each give 2 minutes of why they are in this movement and they're not backing up on this agenda. And then we're going to go straight to Representative Kennedy. Representative Kennedy will come speak to us. He has to go now. Okay, he's got to go to meet Representative Kennedy. Come on, because we know there's some budget stuff going on and you have to vote. So he will come on and make his comment, and then we'll have those other 4 persons. Representative Kennedy.
Forgive me, everybody. Bishop, it is always an honor and a pleasure to be with you, and Attorney and Reverend Theoharis. Listen, to count myself in your company here on these series of issues is an extraordinary honor for me, as always. The only thing that I would say is getting back to literally the very heart of the platform, establishing justice, promoting the general welfare, ensuring domestic tranquility, securing the blessings of liberty, and providing for common defense. These are not new fights. This is not a new battle. This is not a blue or red issue. This is not Democrat or Republican. This is codified in the founding documents of our nation. This is meant, we proclaimed that all men are created equal, and then we deliberately and intentionally and systematically cut people out. And so what this fight is for, what you have given voice to so eloquently as always, is literally the quest for the identity of a nation and the challenge to each and every one of us as to what we are willing to do and how far we will go to ensure that those values and that those principles apply to every single person that calls this nation home. And I'm grateful for your efforts, for the calling for a moral revival, and for, more than anything, a request for empathy and compassion from every single person in this nation, for understanding and for hearing from somebody that is different. And that if we are willing to and able to do that, then these principles fall into place. However, I can be of service to you and your team going forward and your cause. I am honored as always. Thank you all so much, and apologies for the time crunch.
Thank you so much, Representative Kennedy. Thank you so much. We are glad that you're joining the ranks. We have other friends who are on joining. We know Representative Lee was going to be on, but she's on a flight and she can't be on, but she's a champion. I know other folk are on the line, Sheila Jackson Lee, G.K. Butterfield, others who with the Progressive Caucus who are very serious about this. And we get, again, to those on the media, we invited both sides of the aisle. So I want people out there who are on this to see who's showing up. For us, this is not about left and right, Democrat or Republican. It's about who's willing to take a moral stand and be true to what they swore to uphold when they put their hand on the Bible and swore to uphold the Constitution. We have a message from Senator Warren. Thank you, Representative Kennedy, Congressman Kennedy. We have a message from Senator Warren now. She could not be with us here, but she was the first person to organize a hearing for the Poor People's Campaign on Capitol Hill. And Pamela Rush, Pamela Rush died this past week because of racism, because of poverty, because of ecological devastation. Powerful sister. And we give tribute to her. She was the first person to testify at a formal event in Congress. And she told her story from Alabama, from Loudoun County, Alabama, where she was clear that the civil rights movement came from, much of it was born there. But you can drive 5 miles off of that highway where they marched over the Edmonds Pettus Bridge, and it looks like the civil rights movement never happened. It looks like there was never a war on poverty. And she was committed to fight. And because of these injustices, the lack of health care, because of all of the things, voter suppression, predatory lending, she's dead. She's dead in less than 2 years. And her sister is in the hospital, dying from the very things Liz talked about unnecessarily. And Senator Warren convened, none of the other side, the Republicans wouldn't come, but Senator Warren, when we first came, organized a group, and we spoke to 5 of what would soon be presidential candidates. We're looking in this moment for who is willing to stand, not who is willing to be symbolic, and who is willing to fight for folk like Pamela and so many others. Play the video.
The fight for social, racial, and economic justice has reached a new threshold. Across this country, people are protesting to give voice to the injustice, the pain, and the trauma that Black Americans have endured for far too long, and to demand justice for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others. As a nation, We have some serious soul searching to do. Racial disparities persist in wealth, education, employment, housing, health care. COVID-19 is disproportionately killing Black, brown, and indigenous people. Businesses owned by people of color are disproportionately going under. Now, in times of crisis, it can feel as if this is the way things will always be. But in a democracy, we, the people, all of the people, have the power. And that's why I'm so proud to fight alongside Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign in their efforts to uplift the needs and demands of poor and low-income communities who are bearing the brunt of this crisis. We have so much work to do, but I am confident that if we stand together, if we fight together, if we persist together, then we can create a country that works for everyone, especially the most vulnerable among us. It is an honor to fight alongside you.
Thank you so much, Senator Warren. And after we hear from people who are building this campaign, if there are congresspersons that would like to make a quick comment, that congresspersons that will join and are all fighting and are willing to join and fight this battle. And let me say one thing to everybody on this call. In this campaign, we don't separate systemic racism from systemic poverty. We're saying you got to address the poverty in Appalachia and Alabama and Appalachia, Kansas. And Democrats and anybody will make a mistake if you racialize poverty, or if you only talk about poverty when you talk about Black people. That's a mistake, because extremists who put together the Southern strategy, they connect their racism to their economic message, and then they end up hurting all people. We have to be able to talk together, and we have to be able to show that racism and poverty are detrimental and deadening and devastating to all people. And I know sometimes this sounds strange for people. I get it all the time, Liz, you get it all the time. They ask you, why is it that you're not just working on women's issues? Because you're a woman. They ask me, why am I not just working on Black issues? Because I'm Black. Well, first of all, because we understand the interlocking injustices. We understand interlocking injustice. And because we are full human beings with people of faith, we understand that we don't have to separate our critique out. That is what they said of Dr. King. They told him, when he started talking about poverty and the war, you're getting too big for your britches. You need to stay over there and deal with civil rights. No, he always understood, and the people around him understood those welfare rights women. They knew that you got to organize everybody that's willing to organize for transformation, and all of these issues are connected. That's one of the reasons we've got now, we want Michaela from Curry from Kentucky to come on. A dear fighter and warrior, Maureen Taylor, and then Abigail Mosley, and Kenya Alcorser, in that order, if you will come, and then we may hear some comments from other congresspersons. Would you come in that order?
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yes. Hey, my sister.
Hey, Dr. Barber. Hey, y'all. My name is Michaela Curry. I'm an organizer with the Kentucky Poor People's Campaign. I'm on the coordinating committee. I'm sure right now in Kentucky is on a lot of people's minds. The Louisville Metro Police Department killed Breonna Taylor while she was sleeping. The National Guard killed David McAtee, and there's been no justice for either of those folks. The Kentucky Poor People's Campaign has been organizing all over the state for several years now on a variety of issues. I've lived in Eastern Kentucky in Pike County for the last 4 years. We organized a moratorium stop in Hazard, Kentucky. And I think that a lot of times when people think of rural areas, rural Eastern Kentucky, they have fixed ideas about what that is. I think when people think about rural folks, they think about hillbillies and they think about rednecks and they think about people from the South. But we're not the scapegoats. We're not to blame for their aggressive policies that are not just affecting Kentucky, that are not just affecting the American South, but are affecting all of America. I know a bunch of really hardworking folks in Eastern Kentucky who worked so hard over the last couple of years to fight a new prison being built in Eastern Kentucky, because we are being fed the lie and the mindset that tries to tell us that that's all that we can hope for, that jobs in prisons is the economy that we have to rely on. And we know that's not true. That's why we need the Jubilee platform in Kentucky, because we need employment that is socially beneficial, that is centered on community care. And we know it's possible. We are coming, all of us, from all of our areas where extractive economies have robbed our communities. You know, when people think about Eastern Kentucky, it's obvious. They think about coal. You think about water quality issues. I know Flint comes to mind, but Martin County, Kentucky, they had a coal slurry spill back in 2000, and the water there is still not safe to drink.
Teach us.
There's carcinogens and nervous system disruptors in their drinking water. The Kentucky Public Service Commission has said that they are in a constant state of emergency. That's the next county over from where I live. Since January 2018, the rates for water service in Martin County have increased by 41.5%. It is unaffordable for at least half of the people who are living there. The entire time that I have lived in Pike County, Kentucky, our water has been above the legal threshold for trihalomethanes, which lead to liver and kidney toxicity, have carcinogenic effects. I have a 32-year-old friend who is battling thyroid cancer. I know of people who have cancer clusters up and down hollers where there has been acid mine drainage. That is why we in Kentucky and all over this country, we need a full financial assessment, like we call for in the Jubilee platform, of the environmental damage that's been caused by fossil fuels and extractive economies. That's continuing to lead to climate change. We need to declare climate change a national emergency, because it is. It's a health crisis, it's a race crisis. We know that all this is happening. And if we have awareness and we don't have action, that is apathy, and that is unacceptable. We are part of an economy that is working the way it is intended to work, which is the accumulation and enclosure of wealth and power. We see that Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, we know we've got to get him out. His net worth is said to be about $22 million. In Pike County, the poverty rate is 24%. And that is at a standard of poverty that doesn't even really take into account the people that are one crisis away from being houseless or not being able to pay their bills, that have no economic security, that don't have childcare. We have fine roads in Eastern Kentucky because they're built for the coal trucks, they're built for the industries, but people don't have transportation to get to medical care. In the last 10 years, over 120 rural hospitals have closed in America. 4 of those have been in Kentucky, but there are 16 rural hospitals that are at high risk for closure, and 35 that are in financial instability. Yes. And so we know we have to get Mitch McConnell out of Kentucky. We know that. But we also have to get out of this system. This system is working the way that it's supposed to, and poor and working class people are not responsible.
That's right.
We are not responsible. Our society is sick, and we need a moral revolution.
My God. We want you to know that don't worry so much about Reverend Liz and Reverend Barber. It's Michaela and all those others that are building this movement that you're going to have to deal with. Dear Sister Maureen Taylor.
Good afternoon, and hello to all of my colleagues. It's so wonderful to see you all. There's a reason why Reverend Liz and Reverend Barber are co-chairs of this movement and of this activity, and I'm not. There is a reason. They bring a spiritual foundation to this fight, and I probably have a spiritual component in me, but I can't find it because of the immoral approach that's used across this country that dictates how we treat each other. It's just scandalous.
That's right.
I live in Michigan, and I serve as the state chairperson of the Michigan Welfare Rights Organization. And last night at midnight, the protections that were offered to individuals to keep them in their homes because they couldn't pay rent, and they couldn't pay rent because of the virus, those protections ended at 12:01 last night. And we've got some 10,000 households just in Detroit that are now up for what can we do to keep in our places where we live. Now, we've got some programs in place. We've got some individuals, some elected officials that have some things that they're moving around to help those 10,000. But I live in the Wayne County, and there are 83 other cities that live where I live, and none of them so far have been offered any further protections. And what have they done wrong? They didn't do anything wrong. The virus showed up. We have no national leadership. We are on our own. New York does what it wants to do. Michigan does what she wants to do. California does what they want to do, and across the nation, we have nothing but total chaos. And who is the brunt of all of this madness? And it's the low-income Indian, the low-income Negro, the low-income Hispanic, and the low-income white person. And those are the descriptions of the persons that are holding on by their, just by their very teeth. We've got 10,000 households involved in this. And one of my friends told me just the other day, use this phrase. And it's a rural phrase. It's called culling the herd. And I hadn't heard that in a long time. And when you're talking about culling the herd, what that means is those animals who are weak, not wanted, don't look like the rest, don't think like the rest, don't feel like the rest, it's all right for them to be disadvantaged and let go. And that's for sure what's going on. I serve on the governor's task force for racial disparities. And it's incredible to believe that in the year 2020, we still have African Americans dying of higher rates on the COVID test. And it just goes on and on and on. So as we talk about this moral public policy agenda, we don't have to be hamstrung by old comments that used to say, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't fund this, we can't imagine that. None of those things exist anymore. We live in an economy that allows technology to make certain that we can get whatever the heck we want.
That's right.
We raised this question of we have to have affordable housing. We could do that by the end of August. If we say we need universal health care, we could do that by the end of September. If we say we need nutritional food for everybody, California and Florida, if they stop spreading the COVID, can feed the entire country. We can finish that by the end of October. When we talk about the need for education from birth to death, by the end of the year, we should be able to finish that. So I urge all of the folks that are on this line and people that will hear these comments, it is better to listen to Reverend Liz and to Reverend William than listen to me. Because if you take on what they're telling you and coming through the spiritual door, that is a much better position. I'm a social worker by trade. It's called the social workers together. We know how to put the list and whatnot together. If you don't listen to them, then you're going to be forced to listen to me. And I got a message for you. Thank you so very much. My name is Maureen Taylor. I serve as state chair of Michigan Welfare Rights. Listen to my colleagues so I don't have to come to your state.
Amen. And Maureen, I want you to know, if they don't listen to this, I'm joining you.
I ain't mad at you, Reverend.
I told folk, we're trying to do it the right way. We're pushing it the right way, but do not think that we won't be in the streets and do massive nonviolent civil disobedience. Only thing right now, we're not doing it because of COVID, and we're not going to put ourselves there. But be very clear, we with you, Sister Taylor.
I'm there, sir. I'm there.
And it's all righteous. It's all righteous.
All right.
Take care. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you for your love and your wisdom. Abigail Mosley.
Hello, everyone. I don't know how I'm going to follow that. Oh my goodness. Follow it. My name is Abigail Mosley. I am a 2020 graduate of Bennett College, and I'm also an intern at Beloved Community Center of Greensboro. So I was asked actually yesterday by an older member of my community how my peers felt about this election. Were they excited? Did they plan to vote? Do they recognize the urgency of this movement? And there were two sides to my response. I have many friends who are also organizers and who are active community members that know just how valuable and how necessary their participation is in this political process. However, I recognize within others a feeling of resignation, unfortunately. I recognize this especially within my peers from North Carolina A&T State University who experienced voter suppression firsthand when their campus was split into two districts, diluting the Black youth vote. And so many view the political world as a morally corrupt space filled with power-hungry individuals and politicians. And I recognize this in them because 4 years ago, it was exactly how I felt. I felt discouraged, I felt unimportant, devalued, suppressed, even erased. And so the Poor People's Campaign Jubilee platform, which is grounded in both biblical principles and ideas present within the United States Constitution, encourages that the right to participate in the voting process be established as an indicator of democracy. It ensures that young people like me, people of color like me, poor people, and other minority groups are not systematically suppressed as they have been throughout history and even today. The right to vote should not be dependent upon one's race, one's economic status, whether one has been or is incarcerated, or one's level of education. We must prioritize the marginalized, the historically disenfranchised, and the overlooked. We must move not with ideas based around political or economic gain, as so many do today, but with a good moral compass guided by justice, which, as Dr. Cornel West always says, is simply what love looks like in public. I so deeply appreciate the work of the Poor People's Campaign, and I thank you, Reverend Barber and Reverend Theoharis, for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much from North Carolina. Kenya from California.
Hello, family. Yeah, I mean, it's been a couple of tough months for us here in California. My name is Kenya Alcocer. I'm an undocumented immigrant here in the state of California, a mother of two, Jimena, who has been a member of the California Poor People's Campaign since we started. Her favorite song is Everybody Has the Right to Live. And my son, who's 6 months old, Genaro, who has special needs. This platform, this Jubilee platform, it's very important for us here in California and for me personally. California is the 5th biggest economy in the world. And let that just sink in, because in California, people are dying from poverty every day. In California, like Maureen was telling us, we produce 1/3 of the nation's vegetables and 2/3 of the nation's fruits and nuts. This would be enough to feed everybody in the entire country, yet there's people that are still starving. I organize with Unión de Vecinos and Los Angeles Tenants Union here in California, in Los Angeles. And one of the things that we've been working around, it's on April 1st, we called for our rent strike. Our community members were calling us, letting us know that they weren't able to pay their rent on April 1st. They had lost their jobs, family members have gotten sick with COVID. And this is something that is happening across the country. People are going, those who qualify for unemployment are filing for unemployment. Those of us that are undocumented don't have the ability to qualify for any of the services or relief. Here in the state of California, there are some reliefs for undocumented people, but it's not enough. Just this week, the city of LA passed $100 million for rent relief for tenants. This is $2,000 per family, but the money never crosses your hand. It goes straight to your landlord. Corporate landlords are getting money while tenants are left without anything to eat on their tables, and maybe with the hanging stress of after this pandemic being evicted, because they won't be able to pay the debt that they have accumulated over the months for not being able to pay their rent. This is the story of many people, and the reality is that the Jubilee platform allows us to push for everything and not just one thing. As an undocumented person, if you tell me that you would give me citizenship tomorrow, it is meaningless for me if that doesn't come attached with a guarantee to have a home for my children, without debt relief for medical expenses, and with a guarantee that everybody would have the right to live. I am sad today because I actually testified with Pamela.
My God.
Hearing. And she should have been here.
That's right.
Enjoying the fruits of her labor and celebrating the fact that we had accomplished what we're set to accomplish today. And Pamela is one of many soldiers of this poor and dispossessed army that we're building here today, that has fallen, but it will never be forgotten, and the reason why we will continue to fight. we want to make sure that this platform is something that is prioritized by our representatives.
That's right.
So while we have one of my representatives here in the state of California, we urge you to push this through because people are dying, because COVID-19 is not the reason why we're in this crisis. It is the greed of many.
That's right.
And we have to make sure that we can pass a platform that doesn't just give a certain few, like DACA or Dreamers, a path to citizenship, but allows children that are in detention centers right now being exposed to this virus to be released. For those who are part of the LGBTQ community that are in detention centers being denied access to health care. For all of these people to have the ability to have a quality of life, we are here today to say that we have become more than a movement. We have become a family. Mm-hmm. And this family will stick together and fight through anything and everything to make sure that we win. And I really appreciate all of you. So thank you so much for having me here.
That's right, Kenya, you were there. Your sister's spirit is all over you. She's still with us. We are not going anywhere. And I want folks to hear that. They might, don't mistake the power and the depth of the people that make up this movement. This is not just a moment, it is a movement. You might say, well, you know, because of COVID, people can't do something. No, don't mistake. We're going to be, our power will show at the ballot box. And then afterwards, we don't care who wins, but we know what we want to see happen. We're going to be there. And that's going to be the day that's going to come that if we're not heard at this point, we're going to mobilize and sit in every places and do what we have to do through nonviolent civil disobedience, because this for us and for this nation is a matter of life and death. It's not just a matter of cute politics. We don't want people to pass bills, but simply write bills to pacify us that they never get forward. That's why we invited the leadership of both areas to be on this call, because we understand how this process works. If the leadership wants a bill to get on the floor, it gets on the floor. If it doesn't, then people just write bills and they say, we wrote the bill, but then there's never any progress on it. This is nothing to play with. Can't play with Michaela, can't play with Maureen, can't play with Abigail, can't play with Kenya, can't play with any of the folk. We are the foundation, the rejected stones, and it's time. It's been time. That's why we've organized slow and deep roots, built power, built relationship. And you heard Kenya say something that we want folk to hear, and I think we're going to use that from now on, Kenya and Liz. This is not just a movement, it's a family. We see one another as brothers, and I don't know about the rest of y'all, but when somebody messes with my family member, that's all out. We going all out to fight against that. This is about the family. The rejected family has come together, and we are now a family of revival and revolution, and we're building every day, and we're very serious. I did hear that your congressperson, Barber Lee, is on the line. We are about 50. Not yet. Well, we are over our time. And so we're going to have to, we had a set time. We're going to have to close this out. But I want you to know that there are other congresspersons. Please touch base with Shally Gupta Bond. Have her, because we're very serious about who is willing to champion these ideas. And when we say champion, we mean fight all the way. Fight all the way. Not just fight because Democrats are in control, but even fight, as we say, when others are in control, because we know something. We learned this in the civil rights movement. Charles Hamilton Houston fought and lost a lot of cases before the Supreme Court case in '54, but every case allowed justices the right of dissent, and it was those dissents that were used later to build the case that was eventually won. If we fight right, even when we have overwhelming forces against us, even defeat will become victory, because we lay down a standard, and we lay it down and say, this is something worth fighting for, living for, and giving our breath for. So Liz, as you close us out today, we want to thank everybody for coming, and understand this is just a briefing. Y'all understand a briefing means we're just laying it out. This is not an ending. This is a beginning. There's going to be an all-out push and all-out lobbying on Congress and all-out bringing of people. And we're going to do it electronically now. And then when we can go back to doing it physically, we're going to do it physically. And we're going to push and push and push because we cannot accept this anymore. It's over. It's time now for a full reconstruction and revolution and revival in this country. And the people you've heard from today are leading it. I'm just thankful they let us be servants. But I'm with them. Liz, you with them?
I'm with them.
I'm with them. I'm with myself, as a matter of fact. And so we're fighting together, and we're going to stand, and we're not going to turn back. It will not be said on our watch that we did not fight and do everything we could to transform. If this nation falls, it will not be because the rejected did not show it the way not to fall. Amen. Reverend Liz, take us out. All of our Congress people, please have your staffs contact Shally Gupta Barnes. Thank you for coming on today, and forward together, not one step back.
My only closing words are that the word Jubilee comes from the root in Hebrew, Hobel, which means a trumpet blasting, songs of resistance and freedom. What we've heard today, what we're seeing every day in our communities, even in this pandemic, is sounds and horns and cries of somebody has been hurting our people. It has gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. We're going to mobilize, we're going to organize, we're going to register, we're going to educate people for a movement uniting around this agenda, a movement that protests and sings and blows that horn and votes. And so we thank everybody for joining us. We are the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. We have a moral agenda that can indeed heal this nation. That's our Jubilee platform. It's a policy platform. We're launching it in its fullness today. We're organizing, and we believe that we indeed will win. Thank you for joining us. Please send your questions and comments, how you're going to push this platform if you're a legislator, so that we can make it so. And keep on fighting if you're with a partner organization, a faith organization, a coordinating committee of the Poor People's Campaign, because we are building power. We are making our voices heard. We're shifting this narrative. And we are for sure moving forward together and not one step back. Blessings, be well, and let's do this all in the spirit of Pamela Sue Rush.